Joe, and welcome to Talk with Sally. I have been looking forward to our conversation, and I'm so delighted you agreed to take part in the series. Could you just, for those who are watching or listening, just explain a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm really excited, Sally, because as one of your clients, as well as a real fan of what you do, I'm really excited to be part of this. So thank you for having me first and foremost. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jo Taylor. I'm MD of Let's Talk Talent. My business is 7 years old. And fundamentally, it came from a passion of mine, which is ultimately about how we unlock the potential in people. I've had a really eclectic career, and I've always had really great mentors and coaches and managers who have seen that potential in me and helped me unlock it. And I really wanted to do that as a business owner and as a founder. And I have, hopefully, after 7 years, we're doing that really successfully, and we've grown the business and are about to hit some really strong milestones. So excited from a personal perspective, but also professional, to be part of this conversation.
Oh, no, it's I love your energy. I love your wisdom, and your passion is infectious, which is why I just had to have you in the series.
Thank you.
When I was thinking about the timing that our conversation will be going out, no one needs me to say, crikey, the world's in flux. There is so much change and so much uncertainty. So I thought, what better way could I and we serve the greater community than have a conversation about this and ways that you and I, in a similar but different fashion, support our clients. So I wanted to ask, from your perspective, Joe, what are you hearing and seeing in your client base and from your network that leaders, those senior leaders and teams especially, are really seeming to struggle with at the moment?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a couple of things, and I think it's a really pertinent time. You've hit the nail on the head. The world is definitely in flux. Only last week with the Queen, you look at that from a succession perspective, and it's super interesting when you think about the future of kind of the leadership of the country, not only the government changing, but kind of the sovereign changing. So there's a lot, I think, for everybody to kind of compute. And for leaders, I think it's first of all, it's a very exciting time. I think you kind of, whenever something is changing, I'm always one of the people that you kind of have to look at things positively. What are you going to learn from it? What are you going to take, and how are you going to take your people with you? But I think it's also a quite traumatic and stressful time for leaders. So I know for me, I've been through a lot of personal change over the last couple of years. And I think sometimes it's giving yourself the space. And I think business has, at the moment, moving at such a pace that it's really difficult to give yourself the space as a leader. Because first of all, you are supposed to know everything.
Of course.
You're supposed to be inspiring, right? You're supposed to be inspiring. You're supposed to be able to communicate. You're supposed to be empathetic, compassionate. Your EQ's got to be stronger than your IQ. I mean, where do you stop?
And make money for the business all at the same time.
100%. Yeah. So what I think we're seeing is leaders really struggling to be vulnerable.
Interesting.
And to be comfortable to be vulnerable.
Do you think that's really changed since the COVID times? Do you think COVID gave a permission to be vulnerable, but now it's a bit more like put your guard up, everyone's competitive again?
I think the hybrid, and also a lot of leaders going back into the business, has sort of, we've regressed again.
Yeah,
into that sort of slightly micromanagement, command and control, carrot and stick approach, which I really hoped was going to dissipate through the pandemic, and did dissipate, because you definitely saw leaders be more compassionate and be more vulnerable. But now that we're sort of heading into a recession potentially, businesses are trying to recoup, let's be honest, what they lost.
Yeah.
The market for talent is hugely high. So they're afraid about how they're going to retain great people in their organization. There's a lot of balls to juggle.
There really are. And I've been saying to clients only this week, what I think we're all already forgetting is the COVID period. Yes. Because COVID, when it was happening, was all encompassing, all new, all in it together, all in the same boat.
Yeah,
which in a way had not that you wish that on the world, but a loveliness about the support and the camaraderie and the stripping away of lots of the barriers, because it was we're in the same boat together. Let's just help each other.
Yeah.
Not did we get a minute to wipe our brows, and then the horrible war in Ukraine broke out, and it's still raging away. And then it's the energy crisis came, and then very sadly, our dear Queen, although we all knew it was coming, I put a post out how sad I was, and I was surprised how personally sad I was affected.
It's a
by
moment
that.
in time. It's a moment in time. It's all we've known. And I think I remember my mum was in tears because she was 4, when the Queen was the Queen, and so that's all she's sort of known as that. So I think it's had an effect, especially as actually, in a way, the role models in leaders, if we look at this sort of from a macro perspective, some of the people that we're supposed to respect. So we're supposed to respect politicians, but we don't, right?
We don't.
Not after the last couple of years, right? So whether you're a monarchist or you're not, actually the stability that the monarchy has, and all of that being stripped away, people going into a winter where COVID is going to spring up, we know it's going to happen, right? Where's the battle plan in effect? There's been loads of stuff recently with businesses thinking about whether they should give people the bank holiday on Monday, and really interesting conversations about those things. It's not in our contract, so we're not legally obliged to do that. I'm thinking,
yeah, but are you not?
Where's the human?
Totally. And that's a great point you mentioned, actually, this new bank holiday for an occasion that is new for, I'd say nearly everybody, so many people in the country. And there's no precedent for it. And even the word unprecedented, you can't almost use anymore because you kind of flinch because it's been used so much. Yeah. But I think also what I'm seeing from that leadership perspective is that, God, not something else we have to work our way through, something else that there's no rule book for, that we have to make a call when we're tired, when we're stressed, when the numbers are vulnerable. Yeah. Yes, we've been emotional. Haven't we been emotional for 2 or 3 years now? Do we have to keep being emotional?
I agree.
So that's what people are forgetting in those financial leadership positions. I'm hoping and praying that companies don't knee-jerk to go, we'll just cut the budgets then around talent, around leadership and development. Because I was just saying to a client only today, I've seen that happen over in all the other recessions I've worked through. The knee-jerks are the companies that fail, ultimately. They come out a bit worse off when the tide will eventually turn again.
I'm not seeing that, actually. I'm
just starting to see it. Yeah, with a couple of the big players. Yeah.
Interestingly, I suppose because we work in much more of the SME market, and I think that the SME market is doing 2 things. It's saying we need to slow down to speed up, so we need to do less, which I thought was a really interesting concept. Actually, let's do some things that are bigger and better quality rather than the 20 things that we used to do in quantity. So I thought that was super interesting. And I think also the SMEs are also realizing that retention is their number 1 lever in terms of their sort of cultural KPI. So they're actually trying to grow their own. So we're seeing much more investment in career pathways, in leadership and management, in succession planning than we've ever seen before.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually, because also I'm fascinated in succession planning. And luckily, there are still a lot of clients out there who are investing. I'm just wanting to do a message out to anyone who's going to knee-jerk, don't, because it's not going to be
100%.
Not going to be a winning strategy in the long term. But the retention piece, what's your practical advice, Jo, from your unique expertise and how you help your clients, that the people in our community now, the leaders listening, what can they be doing around retention? Because there's so much talk around its importance, but I often find that's not followed through by really good action.
Yeah. So I think it starts with career pathways. Mm-hmm. So I think it starts with enabling people to understand the art of the possible. So drop the terms progression and promotion and use the term possibilities. What's the possibility of me having a career journey with you? Now, that could be being a specialist or being a generalist, or it could be as simple going from I'm in commercial and I want to go into marketing, or I'm in HR and I want to go into finance. How do you give people the art of the possible and give them control of their careers? Coupled with that, are you really clear on the skills? So we use the STAR model, the skills, training, attributes, and relationships that sit alongside. So
Okay.
you're saying that you want people to develop and navigate their career. That's your why. The what is, in effect, your competencies or the STAR model. And then the how is the possibilities. And what you're doing is you're giving people that, I think, simplicity, number one, but also consistency, number two, which I think is really important.
Oh, refreshing words in the current climate. Can you imagine if everyone just went, make it more simple and be consistent?
100%.
Yeah.
So I think investing in the career possibilities, because if you look at you look at, there's an article by Harvard a couple of years ago that looked at the reasons why we work, and they called it the 3 C's. Career was number 1, community was number 2, so the people you work with, and cause was number 3. Money actually
often
came
way
further down. But I think what we are seeing now with recession and cost of living, money coming further up. So I think thinking about your reward and your recognition approach. So not just thinking about cash in hand. How are you creating the total reward package for people? How are you driving your L&D into that? How are you looking at coaching? How are you looking at stretch projects? And looking at it from that lens of 70% of your development should be on the job. 20% should be through your network, through the network that you have within the organization and your manager, and 10% should only be formal. And what a lot of organizations are doing at the moment is they're investing in the 10%. And for me, that needs to change. We need to shift the emphasis back to I think, the 70%. Because that's what's going to drive retention. You've got to say to people, why are you working for? It's not just because you like me as a leader or you trust me as an organization. There's a much more deeper emotional connection.
Oh, the emotional piece is critical. And what's interesting, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my core client base, which is that senior tier, the execs.
Yes.
And actually what I feel from that succession and retention point of view is their needs and wants and development is put at the bottom of the list.
100%.
And so I would say that 10% for me is that vital statistic to invest in those core leaders. So if they know what their career path is, their development needs, and they're feeling supported, they are going to do a far better job and be 100%. Able to not need so much of that formal piece for the sort of the bulk of their employees and staff, because they've got a better handle on it, because their needs are looked after first.
Well, I think it starts from the top down. You need a sponsor that's going to say, this is really important to us and this is why. But then you need to go bottom up as well. I talk about it, and I'm sure you do as well, about personas. So who are your tribes within your organization? And they need different things, right? So a senior leader doesn't necessarily, may have got to their position and actually want much more formal, as you said, formal intervention, as when you're an apprentice and you actually just want to be shown and told where to go. So I think it's important to understand that different generations.
Utterly. Yeah. And also to do what's right for your business.
100%. There's no cookie cutter, and that's what we do. We're not, here's a template. You can do. It's about bespoking the solution and what's right for that organization. And succession, I see it as 3 things. Succession is you've the talented many, so that's the bulk of your organization, your highly regarded specialists, and your future leaders. And the deal that you give those 3 groups is very different.
Yeah. And the deal you're for yourself.
100%.
Yeah, for yourself. What I'm also seeing a lot in the market is a lot of change in senior jobs, actually.
Yeah.
Given that talent crisis, if you want to be dramatic, but I always say, well, it's not that. To me, it's been coming and going for years. You've just got to do it better. That's all that it takes. Commit to it and do it better, and you'll get better results. Be lazy about it and you're not going to get the right people. That's never changed. But I'm interested to see just how many people right now, high profile people, are changing jobs. And I'd love your thoughts, Jo, on advising anyone who's watching around setting up for success. Because I think if we look at the reality of the pressure, the investment that goes into hiring, not just financial, but emotional and resource and time, then often what people do is they go, right, you're in now, off you go, just solve the problem. What's your advice around the first 100 days and kind of getting somebody really securely set up for success in their jobs? Because I've got a very maybe controversial idea, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So for me, in terms of setting someone up for their first 100 days, I think you have to start with three things. I know I've talked a lot in three today, but so I think you have to start with the head, right? So what's the logic? What does that person need to know? So the rules of engagement, the ways of working, the politics, the ways you get things done in the organization, their job role, their objectives. I think that's the head, all of those elements. I think you then need to focus on the heart. So how do people understand the values, the behaviors, cues and clues that make you successful? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a coach? I think the heart is where a lot of people don't spend the time. They spend the time on the head. And then I think you need the do is I personally, and this happened to me when I took my last proper job before I started my own business. My boss said to me, he gave me 60 days of the 90 days to just talk to people in the business. Brilliant. And to come back with my strategy after 60 days. And that was the only thing that I had to do. So I didn't have any other objectives to do. I didn't have to, I went to meetings and I set up focus group, but I had the time. And I don't think a lot of senior leaders get that time, because most of the time they're filling a seat that someone left and it has been on gardening leave for. So they've waited a long time because that person may have had 3 months, 6 months, sometimes even 9 months of notice. And they're expected to just come in and do it the same way. And actually, the reason why you've hired them, go back to basics. Why did you hire them? You probably wanted a change.
Yes.
And therefore, what you're then crowding in is all of the old stuff. And you won't get any new if you don't give someone headspace to be able to do that. So I think the greatest gift that people can give in the first 100 days is time with little expectation. That would be my number one.
I mirror that when I'm mentoring clients one-on-one, and I say, you have a gift that you are never, ever going to have again, that you are new.
100%.
Often they want to rush to be secure, to have an impact. And I'm like, God, no, indulge in being new. But here's my slightly different thought around the 100 days, which I think companies are missing a trick. Onboarding and setting up for transition in a senior role at the moment, especially given the extra context of need and fear and kind of turn it around yesterday kind of mentality, is that you don't start from your first 100 days. There's actually a window of your pre-20 to 30 days.
Yeah.
And I always say, oh God, if you just let me in and work with someone before they actually start, because again, you only get one chance to be new. You get one first day.
Good point.
So I think there's a real outdated thinking around first 100 days. And we should actually go a little bit before that and say the golden window before you start, to get yourself ready, to get your mindset correct, to ensure
that pre-life experience. Yeah.
Totally. And I know when I get that opportunity, when I'm doing often from an internal promotion, companies will invest then. The difference, that person then goes and takes the role.
No, I agree with you. We do recommend that as a business. When we just reviewed an induction process and we spent more time talking to them about the pre-life experience than we did about the early life, which is the first 100 days, and then the in life. And I think in some ways people tend to, as you say, focus on the early life, but actually that sandwich between in life. So a lot of businesses forget that you're still new after 100 days. And it's some complex matrix organization, right? So think about the transition from that, but also how can you be keeping in contact? How can you be sharing? How can you be inviting those people in, those senior leaders in very early? Because it will, you don't then become the new person.
Yeah. No, it just comes down often to the little things as well, doesn't it, Jo? Like doing 100%. Little things well.
Yeah.
What about your thoughts and advice around burnout and stress and coping with uncertainty? Because I think the marathon term has never been better for what we're doing at the moment with leadership and kind of keeping your eye on the horizon. And I think burnout, especially as we go into winter, it's darker. There's all the economic piece that we don't want to make a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's certainly going to be interesting. What would you advise a leader, or what a leader can do for their team to be recognizing burnout in themselves or others, but also putting preemptive or supportive measures in place?
Well, I think it comes back to energy. And there are 5 types of energy. And I think it's a bit like really working out which is a better lever for individuals. And I'll explain what I mean. So for me, there's kind of physical energy. I need to burn physical energy at the end of the day because I've been on Zoom most of it. And for me, that really helps with my sort of mental well-being by taking Dylan, our chief dog officer, out for a walk. And whether it's I go for half an hour or I go for a very long walk, physically, just doing something away from the desk has a massive effect on my mental health. And when I don't do it, I can see the difference. And my team would say that.
Yeah.
I think there's mental energy. So I think that's around mindfulness, then really thinking about your mental energy. Where are you being drained? Are you noticing that at certain times of the day, I get more snappy at the end of the day because I've just spent giving the whole time. So where does that mental energy come from? I think there's social energy. Do they need to come into the office more in the winter? With cost of living, we've been noticing that some businesses are talking about actually laying on meals. They're going to have heating. People might not be making decisions. Are you providing opportunities for people to be more social during the winter? The other one is spiritual energy. Spiritual energy is around values and beliefs. So if somebody thinks that their values are being trampled on, they're not being listened to, their work-life balance isn't right, that can have effect on someone's energy. And I'm going to forget the last one, but I'll try and remember in a minute. But for me, it comes down to it basically emotional.
I was thinking, is it emotional? Yeah.
Yeah. It's emotional energy. So for me, where am I at my best? Am I, when you think about the energy quadrant, am I always in high performance, or do I need to reset and relax? And when do I sort of trigger into fight or flight? And that comes through in terms of emotion. So I think really understanding the energy drivers of your team and thinking about, as a leader, how can you notice those things? And I think when we're not with each other, I think it's much more difficult to do that than when we're physically in a room with somebody. But I think it's looking for triggers, it's the cues and clues. But the energy piece for me was a light bulb moment when I was thinking about not only my ways of working, but also my ways of working as a leader that may trigger other people in my team. And also noticing that when we're not together, perhaps we do need to be together. So that's where I would spend my time as a leader, thinking about energy.
I'm glad we're recording that because there was so much there. That was brilliant. There was so many practical different ways that we can support ourselves and also others. So I think that brings me to my last question, which I would be fascinated to hear, given that you are my very dear client. What difference has it made to you personally and professionally having me to be your high stakes leadership mentor? The difference that's brought to you, especially in the current climate?
Well, I think fundamentally, it's given me the permission to be vulnerable. I've been through a big trauma over the last 18 months, and having that support and someone who doesn't know me as well as friends, I think I felt the care and the compassion from you, not only as a person, but as my high stakes mentor. I think that's been hugely beneficial to me. But I think also it's the opportunity to take a step out and be challenged. And I find that one of my biggest drivers is challenge and creativity. And I don't necessarily feel as a founder all the time I get that on a day-to-day basis with my team. I love my team. They're absolutely fantastic, but that's not their role.
Yes. And also it's different. They work for you.
Completely different. They work for me. So I think having that permission, but also that trust to work through the transition that I've gone through over the last 18 months has enabled me to get to where I now am able to plan for the next 3 years, which I would never have got if I hadn't had you as my mentor. So I'm incredibly grateful, but also you've been very kind and given me the time and space to do that at my pace rather than in a set way, which I think is very unique whenever I've had coaching or mentoring in the past.
Thank you. One of my biggest whys is serving and supporting others, especially high performers. So that makes me sing from the inside. You've certainly supported my emotional energy. Probably most of those pillars, actually. I'll go for a run in a minute.
Pleasure.
Jo, we could talk for a very long time because we both share so much passion and expertise for the subject around leadership and talent. It's been a joy and a delight to just take this little short window and chat to you. I hope it's helped others, but from bottom of my heart, thank you for being my guest.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Pleasure.